Hello and welcome to Mission Nonprofit. On Mission Nonprofit, we host a local nonprofit from the Thurston County area. And this month, we have the Autism Family Support Foundation. And with me this month is Patty G. and Molly Feather, and they're with the Autism Family Support Foundation. And so, Patty G., you are the chair of the organization. Could you give us a little start about, can you tell us how it all started? That's what I'm trying to ask. What brought the Autism Family Support Foundation to life?
Okay. I was president and executive director of the Autism Society of Washington for about 5 years and was aware of the legislative movement and the insurance movement that parents were trying to implement in order to get their services and their children's therapies and diagnoses paid for rather than out of their own pocket. But as we are today, only children up to the age 6 are paid by insurance for any treatments or therapies. And the public school does what it can, but our autistic children are involved with the same diagnosis and needs as all handicapped children. So what happened is that the need is now existing, but the need of therapies, interventions, supports for the autistic children, which are now 1 out of 110 children are diagnosed with autism, but 3 out of 4 of those children are boys. So that's something we can talk about later. But there's a dire need to support families in helping them pay for the therapies that they are paying out of their pocket now.
So that's what you guys do, is you help the families of, well, not just children, but with family members that have autism.
Or adults that are alone.
Oh, or just adults on their own.
So what we are doing is we're raising money into the foundation, and then through an application process, particularly focusing on single mothers and families below the poverty level, bridging the gap of what they can pay for the therapy or the intervention and what it costs for them to continue receiving their treatment. Mm-hmm. And so we're just starting. We have a few, maybe 2 families that we support full-time, and we have 5 others that we're just beginning to support. It depends on what our revenue is and foundation-based resources we have, how many we can support at a given time.
Well, I noticed that's in your brochure here, the Bridging the Gap scholarship. Mm-hmm. And that is the money you help you give to families directly.
Well, actually, we don't give to the family. The family lets us know who their provider is.
Okay. And
if they're going to a speech therapist, and then the speech therapist sends an invoice, and the family has already agreed, I'll pay 25%, or I'll pay $10 of it. And then the Bridge the Gap would pay the difference.
I got you. Okay, so if there was some kind of a co-pay that they couldn't do or something like that, then the Bridging the Gap helps.
But we really feel families should pay something.
Yeah, okay, so you're just kind of helping. You're not
that needs to be Bridge the Gap. It needs to be that investment. And they like to feel like they're contributing too.
So that's probably all in the qualifications for the scholarship.
Right. All that is decided in the application.
Kind of whether or not there's going to be matching funds and that kind of thing.
And Molly is our program manager, and Molly actually receives the applications and monitors the family's need. And so I want to share a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, what is it that, what's it like to get those applications and do what you do?
Well, first of all, I love my job, and I love getting those applications and helping, the families, the kids, the adults on the spectrum get the services they need so they can, later on live a more productive life. As a person on the spectrum, I'm receiving therapy has helped me immensely, and I'm so proud of that, But as my job, I received the application. I built databases around those applications so we can monitor and track them, know where the funds are going, you know, the donations and everything involved with that. So it's appropriately dispersed, and we basically know what's going on with the funds, and we can help as many people as we can. So that's pretty much my job as far as like receiving and helping, like, you know, we go by criteria based too, you know, stuff like that, and just you know, making sure the dots and T's are crossed and stuff like that. But personally, it's I just feel so good receiving those applications and knowing that families who wouldn't be able to receive services may be able to now, especially with the economy. It's very important.
And it's interesting what the wide variety of services that they could possibly need. Like you said, speech therapy, but what are some of the other kinds of help that people with, because you know, I don't know if our viewers really know very much about autism, and maybe you guys could explain a little bit about, you know, what are the trouble, you know, what kind of trouble do you experience with autism? And
do you want to start it out? What are some problems that you have?
Yeah, and I don't know if the audience realizes that you have autism too. Could you explain a little bit about your condition and, you know, if you have a specific kind, because I know there's different kinds, correct? Is there different?
Yes, it's called an autism spectrum for a reason. There's people along the spectrum, or they are lower functioning, mid functioning, higher functioning. It just depends on a lot of different factors, you know. And me, growing up, I didn't talk until I was 8. I didn't really write till I was 10. I was, you know, put in special ed. They wanted to put me in institutions. You know, they tried to deny me going to regular school, but luckily, you know, my mom fought for that. And I love school, I love learning. I just couldn't do it in the capacity they wanted me to do it, and show that I was intelligent and I could learn, and that I was capable of going to college, although they told me I was intellectually incapable of doing many things, which I've surpassed all those. But right now, like, my diagnosis is Asperger. I can't say that. I can't pronounce that very well.
Is that the right pronunciation?
Yeah, but that's my diagnosis right now, and how it's impeded my life for a while, you know, was that I had to get accommodations for school because when I went to Evergreen, which was awesome because, like, I could like be able to focus and learn the way I could learn and not have all these benchmarks I had to pass as far as math and other things, which I have trouble in some sections of learning more than others, and it would have been hard to get a degree anywhere else just because of that, you know. And like, so at Evergreen I got accommodations, more time to write papers or less credits to write less papers, but the work I turned in was excellent. They're like, this is the best paper we got, although it wasn't the assigned paper they gave to the other students, you know. And I got
okay, let's move on to your job.
My job
at the state. Why that was?
Oh, okay.
Quickly.
Well, I'll start back a little bit. When I was 30, I got a free screening, and then I worked for Patty for a little while because she saw I had some office skills. And then I got a job at the state because I did have a degree, a BA from Evergreen at that point. And I got hired, and I did well the first month, but because of the fluorescent lights, because like people who are on the spectrum, they're really oversensitive to certain things, you know, because the fluorescent lights how it was physically set up, being in a cubicle, being around a bunch of other people all the time, hearing gossip, you know, having to be in a chair, having specific shifts I had to be at all the time, and it wasn't really flexible. I just became unhappy, and I was getting distracted, not being able to do my work, became like, started getting sick, you know, started getting depressed, and
Getting to work late.
Getting to work late. My coworkers started, you know, kind of making fun of me because, like, I didn't act like them, and like I had other tendencies that weren't so-called like
You wear your hat
normal,
too.
and I have a hat thing, but
Yeah, to help
I
you
like
feel
wearing
calm.
hats because it makes me feel calm, and I had to like get a special permission to do that. So eventually, like, it just became so stressful that I decided to quit, you know, and then they rehired me back a couple months later, and that's where I've been ever since, and been able to steadily do better and better, you know.
Because we accommodate
Yeah.
what's best for you, right?
Yeah, which other jobs I've had, they've never been able to do, although they said I was really good at my job, and they saw I was working hard, but they just couldn't accommodate the accommodations I needed, so it'd end up falling apart eventually.
But you like to wear a hat, you said.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes.
But that made you just feel more comfortable. You're not wearing a hat now, and you're on TV, so.
I know.
Like
I really want my hat.
You want your
So yeah, I'll put it on after we're done. So
Okay.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to cut to a little clip, a video clip from a conference that you were in, and we'll be right back to talk more. Thanks.
So I'm Patty G. I think most of you know me. I worked in the public school for 30 years as a speech pathologist, autism specialist, and then my husband and I retired from public school and started this clinic. Okay, here's the reality. 1 out of 110 children one out of 110 children are diagnosed with Asperger's, and it's 4 times more common in boys than girls. And we'll talk about why that is. 1 out of 70 boys, men, and many of them, as we get older, like I just had a 53-year-old come into my learning center just the other day. So older men are starting to say, I have some behaviors that seem to be getting in the way of my happiness or other people's happiness. But 1 out of 375 girls. So you know what that means, women? We have a good chance of being in a relationship or having children. It's getting more and more common that just by numbers, we're going to be involved living with it on some level. Yeah. So autism is a spectrum. They have now changed DSM-5, which is just coming out. Autism and Asperger and high function autism are not going to be diagnostic words anymore. It's called autism spectrum disorders. ASD. So you'll be hearing ASD, autism spectrum disorder. We're not going to be hearing autism. We're not going to be hearing Asperger. We're not going to be hearing high functioning autism. And that's good and bad, but it's mostly bad for the Asperger folks. But that's what they're going to be doing. Because autism is a spectrum, and like snowflakes, no 2 ASD children are exactly the same or individual or respond to the same treatment the same. And the reason they're going to the spectrum is because they realize even though you have a category of Asperger or autism, it's hard to create a diagnostic criteria for that group. Because even within that group, it's some of this and some of this, and so the whole. This is international. DSM-5 is an international decision, so the whole world is grappling with autism right now.
I just read that they're doing some new definition that they think they're going to cut out.
That's
40%.
Autism spectrum.
Is that the new one? And they think they're cutting out like 40% of the people.
Well, they're thinking that would be the result, in how it's interpreted.
So
It's not intended to be that for the people that are creating this, but it looks like policymakers and budget people may use it that way because there's always budget issues. So there's a big change in the world.
Hello and welcome back to Mission Nonprofit. This month's guest is the Autism Family Support Foundation. And here with me is Patty G. and Molly Feather. And Patty is the chair of that organization. Molly Feather, you are the program manager. So we were just discussing in the first half about some difficulties with autism, I guess some of the handicaps that autistic adults have. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what it's like when a child has autism, and how do you know if it's autism?
All right. Autism now we know is genetic. There's a genetic predisposition, and that predisposition begins a different wiring of the brain prenatally. Now, we know that from functional MRIs, which is very interesting. And the brain develops more of a growth in the cerebral cortex up until the age 2. So that means actually the child is smarter and it seems more aware. But what we know with these young kids is that they appear to be more interested in movement, like moving of a fan or moving of a train or anything that's moving, not so wired to connect with faces. The typical young children, even under 10 months, are looking at faces. They're just wired to look at the faces of their mom and faces. Our kids look at movement. So consequently, their brain is reinforced differently, and so they don't get those nuances and subtle cues. When their behavior is kind of unexpected or does something wrong, they don't see the frown of the parent. So as the child grows older, like gets 2 and 3, they are not aware of how their behavior affects other people. So they run, they might run across the road, they might want something, they might have problems giving up a toy, and in their mind, this is okay. This is what I want. And if I want it, this is what mom wants, because he hasn't noticed that there's a change in their face. So the problem is they don't know how their behavior affects other people, and they don't know how their parent responds to their behavior. And so that's what treatment is about, trying to reconnect the brain so they're more sensitive to what people perceive. We help them look at faces. We help them, even as little kids, try to refocus, respond. Our young kids can't imitate. That's why they have trouble with speech. So teach imitation games.
Yeah, I guess a lot of learning speech
and
is
speech
watching
and language is by watching the face.
Watching the face, yeah.
So if we think about how much they're missing by watching movement, I think that's why they like video games, even our older kids. Think of that. The movement in the video game, very attractive.
They probably like extreme
But sitting
sports.
in a social group, which I haven't when I work with them, I do lots of movement, or they're writing, because just sitting, having them listen to me or watch my face is boring.
Oh, I see.
You know, and they don't take it in. So in a classroom, when they get a little older, they often don't do well in school, because what do we expect them to do? Sit, eyes on the teacher, listen to her. Teachers don't move much. They might have an overhead, but there's a lot of expectation to take in visually and auditorily in a static sitting place, and that's very, very difficult. So our kids fidget, they move, they make noise, they are doing whatever they can to get rid of this energy they have inside, because they like the movement, and they learn by movement, and they like to see movement. So they don't learn in the traditional seating classroom very well. What I have when I work with our students, I have bouncing balls, I have balls that they sit on. I wish more schools had them, because I can get them sitting, because they're always moving, you know, trying to move with the ball, or they're bouncing a little bit. But pretty much they're able to keep their head focused because they're kind of moving around. And that's calming to them. That's getting their energy out so they can focus more.
It's kind of like it sounds like they want to multitask. They want to do this.
They
but
have
then
to multitask. They have to energize their body if they're going to if they can attend. And we want them to attend. So often our children aren't really misbehaving or having the temper tantrum. The temper tantrum might be actually an expression of the frustration that needs to get out. But when we have students get up and walk around the room, they're not up to distract people. They're really up to kind of diffuse that energy that they have to move that doesn't allow them to attend. But we have a different way of thinking about that in
like
a
they're
school
just
setting.
misbehaving. Yeah,
or they're
not
distracting
listening.
kids, or they're...
And they probably are, you know.
Yeah. But if the other students understand the reason they're having to do this, then it becomes less distracting.
That's true. Well, even if adults, if the teachers understood, that might help.
But there's a lot of misunderstanding still,
Exactly.
a huge amount of misunderstanding surrounding autism. The reality is that people like in the higher functioning autistic like Molly, 70% of the individuals still live at home. 30% live on their own, but only 10% are earning an income that's substantial enough to pay all their bills and to be an independent, functioning member of our society. People who have jobs like Molly, most of them have part-time jobs that supplement their SSI or SSA.
Gotcha.
Mainly because the job environment for those 10% have to be created to allow their accommodations to support them enough to make it over a long term. And so 70% are at home, 90% don't have a wage that they can live and pay all their bills. Of people like Molly who are smart and are capable.
Yes.
So there's only a small percentage of our people who have high functioning autism now that are able to what be called successful in living on their own, paying their bills, paying their taxes, just having a marriage or a relationship. It's very small percentage.
Well, for those people out there watching that do have autistic family members and they need your support, I just wanted to mention what your website is so that they can go there. They can find resources on your website. They could apply for the Bridging the Gap Scholarship if they need help with some of their bills, I guess, speech therapy or whatever medical bills they might have. And so that website is www.autismsupportfoundationhomestead.com. So, and they can find all that information there. They can donate, even if they were just a viewer that wanted to help out your nonprofit. Then there's a donate button.
There is a donate button. That's right.
Good. Okay, so now can we kind of touch on a little bit on the different types of autism? Aren't there different names?
Glad.
Okay, sure.
In 30 seconds or less. Okay.
Okay, 30 seconds. Let's try it.
Autism disorder is a spectrum.
Okay. Yeah.
If in the past time, only the children who had also cerebral cortex damage, like retardation, cerebral palsy, those kinds of other kinds of effects, and also had autism, which was a connection between parts of the brain, those what we called autistic. In those past times. That's how they were diagnosed. Okay. They had to have a low IQ, not talking. Then we realized that there's some other, I have a brother who is 59 and he's kind of mid-functioning autistic. He is more learning disabled, autistic, but he doesn't have connections between his brain, parts, the lobes of his brain that allow him to know how his behavior affects other people, to know how I'm feeling in certain situations and to show empathy. He gets very anxious because he doesn't know in this situation what's going to happen next. But he's verbal, and but he has a lot of anxiety.
Okay.
And then at the far end is, and then so there's the retardation, there's a learning disability. And then over here there are people who have autism but have coexisting problems like hyperactivity, coexisting problems like maybe obsessive compulsive. So they have the autism of not getting along with people, not having their brain connected, feeling anxious, but there's often coexisting problems that most providers, most diagnosed mental health people, they see the depression, they see the ADHD, they see the bipolar, they see the, what do you call it? The schizoaffective
Classic.
part.
Yeah.
But they don't see the autism that maybe was the primary, it start the person on this path. And so that's between the middle learning disability, because these people here are normal intelligence, bright intelligence. And then you have the top people like Bill Gates, you know, is Asperger.
I had no idea.
Bill Gates is the top guy over here. Thomas Jefferson was Asperger. Leonardo DiCaprio is Asperger. Spielberg is Asperger. Anyway, a whole group of folks that are pretty typical, but their genius of embarking forward, no matter how it affects other people, because they really don't care how their behavior affects other people, but they are so determined to be this genius in creation that they get wealthy, actually. And it happens that even Thomas Jefferson, his genius of his writing and his political ability as a diplomat and a spokesman, he didn't care how his behavior affected other people. He knew this was the right thing to do. He knew that this country needed him and this to happen. And so we are actually, our country is based on someone that probably, well, one of the people had Asperger. So
this is also fascinating.
It is very fascinating.
Yeah.
But so it's a whole range.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up for this episode. But
we just got started.
We did, didn't we? We'll have to have you back, and we'll have to talk about more about it. But I just want to mention that website again for anybody who's interested: www.autismsupportfoundationhomestead.com. And with us is the Autism Family Support Foundation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
And we'll see you next month. If you know of a local nonprofit that's making a difference in our community, give us a call at 956-3100 extension 103 or send an email to rkam@tctv.net.